Welcome, everybody, to our deep dive into The Shadow of the Wind, a book that seems to have just captivated so many readers. And today we're going to figure out why. We've got reviews, background on Zafón, and some passages from the book itself. You know, the basic story is Daniel Sempere, this young boy in post-war Barcelona, finding a mysterious book
called The Shadow of the Wind
by a totally unknown author.
Julian Carax, yeah.
And it's not just like a fun read.
No, it's like he's stepped into this mirror world. Daniel's life gets tangled up with Carax's, and he's on this quest to find more of his books, uncovering all sorts of secrets.
It's a story within a story, right?
Yep.
Which reviewers loved. One even said it's like an epic film. Gloomy, engaging, smoky noir with those crumbling ruins, young love, disfigurement, lust, even torture. They were comparing it to Phantom of the Opera, The Historian.
That historian comparison is spot on. Both novels use stories to kind of mess with time, how the stories themselves affect people's lives, even generations later.
Like Zafón was doing that on purpose. It's so interesting. And reviewers talked about Barcelona so much, one even took the book on a walking tour of the city.
Well, the way Zafón writes, the city's practically a character. Labyrinthine streets, those hidden courtyards.
And the cemetery of forgotten books.
Looming over it all adds to the whole mystery and intrigue thing.
That's where Daniel finds Carax's book in the first place. But there's this line, every book, every volume you see here has a soul. More than just setting, right? What's Zafón doing with it?
Books are alive. Stories have destinies, just like people. The cemetery isn't just where books die, it's where stories go to be forgotten. Daniel, by finding The Shadow of the Wind, he's rescuing a story.
Reminds me of another quote, books are mirrors. You only see in them what you already have inside you. The stories we love, the ones that really hit us hard, were the ones that show us ourselves, our fears, our desires, our experiences.
Exactly. It's not just a good story, not just a love story. It's about how powerful literature is. A story about stories, how they shape us, haunt us, maybe even save us.
Like, we're having a conversation with Zafón about what being a reader means, about how stories impact us. Reviewers really felt that. One person even rereads it every year.
Makes sense to me. It's the kind of book that each time you read it, there's new layers. Like going back to a place you think you know, then noticing things you missed before. Each time with The Shadow of the Wind, you find something new about the story and about yourself.
That's what makes great literature so amazing. Not all the reviews were totally positive, though. Some thought the writing was, over the top, the plot kind of predictable, and criticisms about the female characters not being fleshed out enough.
Those are valid points worth thinking about, yeah. But question for you, do those things take away from how powerful the novel is? From how it explores love, loss, and, of course, storytelling?
Right. Even if some parts aren't perfect, there's still so much to appreciate in The Shadow of the Wind.
Exactly. What about in those reviews? What really grabbed your attention?
Probably how the book connects the character stories to post-war Barcelona, the historical context. Being set in the shadow of the Spanish Civil War, the Franco regime, it adds a whole other layer to the story.
Absolutely. That historical backdrop isn't just there for looks. It's woven right into the story. Remember that line, the World War, which had polluted the entire globe with a stench of corpses that would never go away? So powerful. Says a lot about how trauma from conflict lasts, how it gets into everything, even years later.
It's not just the war, right? It's how human cruelty, in any form, leaves scars on people and on whole societies. Even in beautiful settings, there's always these shadows.
He uses Barcelona's Gothic feel, crumbling buildings and hidden secrets to kind of mirror what's going on inside the characters. They're all haunted by the past in one way or another. And that brings us to what a lot of reviewers mentioned, the love stories in the book.
There are so many. It's not just one. You have Daniel's new romance, then Julian's passionate but tragic affair, and glimpses into other characters' love lives too. They're all so different, yet connected by this theme of lost love. How the past can still shape us, even when those relationships are long gone.
And that theme of love and loss, it ties in so well with how the novel looks at memory and time passing. It's like Zafón saying, the heart never truly forgets. Even when we have to move on, a part of us stays in those past relationships.
Makes you wonder if anyone in the book truly moves on, or if they're destined to be haunted by those ghosts of their past loves.
Yeah, it hangs over the whole book, doesn't it? Can we ever really escape those shadows? And it's not just the love stories, right? Zafón, he's so good at making these intricate plots, this web of characters and how they're all connected.
Like one reviewer said, it's a story within a story kind of novel. They love the interconnecting twists and turns.
Like a labyrinth. And Daniel's in the middle of it, trying to figure out Julian Carax's life.
But it's not just Carax, right? There are so many other characters along the way. Fermin Romero de Torres, for example.
Oh, Fermin.
He becomes such a good friend to Daniel, but you can tell he's got his own stuff, secrets from his past.
Yeah, he does.
I think Fermin brings some lightness to the story, though. He's witty, resourceful, even when things are tough. You get the feeling he's a survivor, seen some dark things, but still has his humor, his humanity.
He's a good contrast to someone like Inspector Fumero, who represents that darker side of the Franco regime. Wants to control everything, silence anyone who questions things. The way he goes after Carax and Fermin, it shows how dangerous it was to speak out back then.
One reviewer called Fumero a revengeful cop, the book burner himself. Like he's scared of books, how powerful they are.
Exactly. He wants to erase anything he sees as a threat, and that includes stories, the ideas that books carry. We can't talk characters without talking about the women in the shadow of the wind. Some reviewers thought they could have been more developed, but they're definitely important to how the story plays out.
Nerea Montfort, her love for Julian is so strong, so all-consuming, it destroys her in the end. It's a sad story. Made me wonder if Zafon's saying something about how dangerous passion can be. Love can bring so much joy, but also so much pain.
It's like a warning in her story, yeah. The dark side of obsession, how it can eat you up and leave you with nothing. But then there's Beatrice. She's a different kind of love story. The object of Daniel's affection, it's that innocent first love, the excitement and uncertainty that comes with it.
It struck me that both Daniel and Julian fall for women who are, in some ways, out of reach. They both face obstacles, heartbreak, trying to find love. Like Zafón suggesting some patterns repeat themselves across generations. Maybe history does rhyme.
That's a great point. It goes back to how the book explores fate and free will. There's that line, there are no coincidences, we are the puppets of our subconscious desires. Do these characters even have control, or are they just playing out roles that are already written?
Like that shadow of the wind itself, just a metaphor for the past? Or is it something more, something that's actually shaping what happens now? Do the characters have agency, or are they puppets, dancing to a tune they can't even hear?
That's the big question, isn't it? He doesn't make it easy. He wants us to really think about fate versus free will, how our pasts affect the choices we make now. But even with that sense of things being predetermined, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. There's still hope. Like the characters can choose to fight for their happiness, to make their own destiny, even if it's hard.
I like that idea of hope. Even with all the darkness and sadness and the shadow of the wind, there's this feeling that love and beauty can still exist, even in the hardest times.
And that resilience, you see it a lot through storytelling. Zafón seems to be saying stories can take us away, heal us, give us hope when everything else feels lost. Remember, the book starts and ends in a cemetery of forgotten books. It's like he's reminding us that even if individual stories disappear, the act of storytelling, sharing our experiences, connecting through narrative, that's what lasts.
And that might be why people find The Shadow of the Wind so captivating. It's not just a good story, it's a story about stories. About what they mean in our lives, how they connect us across time.
And how they challenge us, make us think about hard truths about ourselves and the world. One reviewer said it made them want to give up pretentious thoughts because the story was just that good.
They were swept away by it, huh? By how emotional Zafon's writing is, how he pulls you into this world that feels both real and unreal.
Exactly. Some people might say it's too dramatic, too sentimental, but that's part of why it sticks with you. He goes for those big emotions, uses vivid language to really immerse you in the story.
Another reviewer said it felt like someone was sitting next to me telling me their favorite tale. Like Zafon's inviting us to just listen to him spin a yarn, lose ourselves in the magic of it.
Even though the plot's complicated, all the twits and different storylines, there's something very basic, very human about how he tells it, like a secret whispered down through generations, a tale that's both timeless and personal.
So, even though it can be tough to read sometimes, it's worth it in the end. It stays with you. Makes you want to talk about it, share it, see what other people think.
Absolutely. It's a book meant to be reread, discussed, debated. It shows how powerful stories are, how magical it is when a reader finds a book that speaks to them deep down.
Makes you think about that cemetery of forgotten books. Not just the place in the book, but like as a metaphor.
Hmm?
What other stories are out there waiting for someone to find them, to bring them back to life?
That's the beauty of books, of stories. There's always something new waiting to be discovered. Like Zafón made us a guide, a map to all these hidden literary treasures.
One reviewer called it a timeless tale. And yeah, I get that. It's set in a specific time, place, but the big stuff, the themes, love and loss, the power of stories, those are for everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from.
Right. It gets to the core of being human, those feelings we all have. I think that's something we really need these days. The world feels so divided. We need stories that remind us we're all connected.
The Shadow of the Wind does that so well. Takes us to another time, but it's also about us, our own choices, the relationships that make us who we are.
One reviewer talked about how the book made them think about their dad. How easy it is to take people for granted, how precious life is. It makes you want to appreciate what you have, live with purpose.
Like Zafón saying, pay attention. These moments matter. Life is short. Sometimes the little things are what end up being most important.
And even though there's a lot of darkness, sadness in the shadow of the wind, there's also this hope, this belief that good things can still happen, even with all the bad. That last scene, Daniel taking his son to the cemetery of forgotten books, passing on that love of stories.
Such a good ending. Brings it all full circle. Leaves you with this feeling that stories have their own life. They're born, they exist, they might get lost for a while, but they're never really gone. Someone will always come along and find them again.
It's a good thought, right? Knowing the stories we love, the ones that have touched us, they'll still be around after we're gone. It's what's so powerful about literature. It connects us across time.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into The Shadow of the Wind, what would you say is the main thing our listeners should take away?
Maybe it's a chance to go back to those books that have stayed with you. Rediscover your own cemetery of forgotten books.
Or maybe it's time to finally pick up The Shadow of the Wind for the first time. See what you discover.
Either way, I hope our conversation has made you a little more curious, given you that push to find the stories that speak to you.
Because, like Zafón reminds us, a story is a letter that the author writes to himself, to tell himself things that he would be unable to discover otherwise. Maybe, by reading, we discover something new about ourselves, too, about the world and how powerful stories are.
So until next time, happy reading, everyone.